Here's my Satisfactory factory tour. I always like to start out in the desert because you've got a lot of quality resources all close together. Instead of building one large mega factory, what I like to do is build a bunch of distributed factories. Each factory is positioned so it has all the resources needed available locally, so you don't have to ship resources to it, making the whole supply chain much easier to manage. Here we have 3 factories producing Tier 2 iron items. They can produce everything they need with just iron ore. As you can see, I'm not a fan of load balancing building inputs. It's much easier just to have everything feed from a single input. This takes longer to distribute the materials evenly, but eventually everything balances out and these factories run forever, so time is less important than effort. On this first floor, raw iron gets fed in, goes into smelters, and comes out as ingots. The second floor, it goes in and comes out as bolts and plates. And here on the third floor, everything feeds into the assemblers, and this puts together the Tier 2 plates. So here we have our single output for the factory, all of the Tier 2 plates, and this links up with the rotors and the, I think, simple modular frames, and that takes us to our train station. Each factory or factory group feeds into a train station that takes all the materials to a central repository for redistribution to further locations. And here you can see the original main hub that I had. I had a hub for all of my trucks to come through. I don't use trucks anymore. I've switched over completely to trains, but the building still remains. Until the last patch, trucks were terribly glitchy and they would constantly just fall through the landscape and disappear off into oblivion. So I was glad to move beyond these and get trains. This will work pretty simply. Several truck stations here at the base would receive cargo from the trucks, and then it would be distributed through some splitters into various storage locations. And then the storage locations would then feed into a temporary factory I'd set up to produce more complicated items to send up the space elevator. Any excess, once those storage locations were filled up, would be fed up into these grinders to make tickets. Just past the bus station is the first of my entrances to my personnel transportation network. This is made out of hypertubes, and if you link enough of them together, you create a man cannon. Way faster than driving or using a regular hypertube. I think I'm not going to be able to make it all the way. Up here ahead, you can see my main train station. Gonna have to make a stop in my quarry. Okay, this will take us the rest of the way. Alright, now you've got a good look at the central hub for my train stations. It's held up above treetop level just to make everything easier to organize. Each factory that's got its own train station links to a large figure-8 train station or train rail network that feeds into these. And then I've got different collection points. So I've got all the crystals are collected at one train station, all the computer parts, and so on. Here you can see the collection point for all the computer components that I make. And because these components are a lot less numerous than like the Tier 1 and Tier 2 iron components, we can use different means to ship these around to other factories because it's too cumbersome to try and generate these all from the locally available resources. And this is linked up to our secondary distribution system, our drone heliport. Each of these drone pads has an input that brings it batteries to power the drones themselves and whatever material they want to distribute out. Oh, there goes a drone. Let's see if we can catch it. Drones are much faster than trains, but they haul significantly less stuff. And the batteries they use are way more expensive than it is just to generate power. Okay, here's a drone that's just dropping off some cargo, and it's about to go on a run to pick up some more. Let's see if we can hitch a ride. This works very rarely, so bear with me. So far, so good. Oh, and off to the left, you can see all of my turbo fuel factories. And, well, okay, that worked about as good as it does most of the time. Okay, we'll just take this hyper tube, and then, okay, you can see I've got my space elevator over there, and I have my temporary buildings that I use to construct the various high-end parts it needs. I usually reconfigure those often. Here's my main hub, and heading over towards the man cannon. So this man cannon takes us to the newest and most complicated part of the factory. And let's see if we can get rid of some of that fog. We'll use a cheat. Much better. So there's my nuclear facility, and right next to it's my battery facility, and then over there you can see my aluminum processing facility. Because nuclear has a lot of steps that it's got to go through before it can start producing power, I gave this place its own backup battery pack that could be isolated to provide a power to run through the first couple cycles while it's starting up the power production again. The uranium comes from behind the water, but I've got also 2 helipads over there that bring in parts to make the uranium fuel pellets. Fuel pellets and lots of water feeds my nuke plants. And it wouldn't be nuclear power without nuclear waste. With the update 4, you could reprocess nuclear waste to get plutonium out of it, but you can't do anything with it when you have plutonium waste. So what I do is I process. You have to be careful around these buildings because it gets highly radioactive. I process the uranium waste into plutonium fuel, and then I put that in the grinders and sink it. So here we have a super collider that's going to turn that uranium waste into plutonium fuel. And whoops, got a little bit too close to the radioactive stuff there. So the danger zone around radioactive materials gets larger and larger the more items you have. So to keep this area from becoming entirely inaccessible, I just sink all of my radioactive fuel into that sink you see over there. So that wraps up the tour of all the interesting parts of my factory. It may be a huge waste of time, but at least it's a whole lot of work too.